Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the 2022 Grant Award Workshop. This morning, I wanted to let everybody know that your microphones will be muted. You won't be able to ask questions out loud. But we do have our chat open and available for any questions that you would like to ask. We have staff who will be monitoring that chat from GCC, and we'll be trying to provide as many responses as we can. However, if you do submit a stumper to us, we will research, find an answer to that question, and we will post it onto our GCC website in the form of questions and answers at the end of our conference. It may take us about a week to get everything pulled together and loaded to the website. We're going to be doing that for all materials that we have. And so you will find recordings that will be posted. You will also find the PowerPoint slide decks that we're going to be using in the different presentations. All of this will be posted to the website at the end of the workshop today. Yeah, one thing that I did want to do is to take a moment to introduce our Executive Director, Ms. Caroline Farmer, for some opening comments before we get started here with the workshop.
Thank you, Jason. I appreciate it. And good morning, everybody. I'm excited to see you here. I'm pleased to welcome back those of you who have been with us a long time, as well as those who are new to our GCC grant community. And I know for some of you, it's a really early morning. You're not used to this, so thank you for being here. You're here today as our grant award recipients, and we want to help you ensure that you are as successful as possible in administering your grants. You are our customers, so please ask questions, reach out to your grants managers and your planners during the coming year with questions. In the near future, we will be generating your grant award agreement and sending it out for your signatures. If you would, please make sure that if there's been any staff changes since you submitted the grant in January, if you would make sure that those have been updated in GEMS. We also are doing a little change and with our grant agreements, and you will be, we're posting the special conditions that are incorporated into your grant agreement. They will be on our website. So just be on the lookout for those changes if you would. I want to personally thank the GCC staff. They've worked really hard to organize this event, and I'm excited to participate myself since this is the first time I've been able to do so as the executive director. Our MC, Jason, is our director of state and federal programs, and so he is going to be taking care of most of your needs today. Thank you very much for being here, and I look forward to working with you this year. Jason?
Well, good morning again, everybody. Again, my name is Jason Wimmer, and in this session, we're going to share a lot of important information that you're going to need as far as management and documentation for each of the grants that you receive from GCC. Now, we are going to be referring to our grant managers throughout this workshop. And what you'll see here on the screen is in red, the people who are new from GCC. And we do have a couple of notes I see coming in from the chat that some people are having a hard time being able to hear, but others are able to hear. I just wanted to recognize that, Josh, in case there's some issues going on with some of the connections. But on the screen, what you see in red are the newest staff members that we have. These new staff members have joined us since the last workshop that we held in 2021. We continue to work to try to expand our staff, but we are also working to train our staff. And recently, our entire staff went through a customer service training. We developed a philosophy and values with that customer service training. While we do understand that the best way to provide customer service is by having strong relationships with you, our subrecipients, our customers, as well as our internal customers, our staff that we work with on a daily basis and other stakeholders, there is often times where we have to redistribute the job duties of grant managers for different situations. So we can't always guarantee that you're going to have the same grant manager every time and for all time, but we try to be as consistent as we possibly can with assigning grant managers and keeping those assigned to you to allow that relationship to be able to develop. Our grant administrators are responsible for many things, One is processing reimbursements, processing budget adjustments, approving of all your expenditures. They provide technical assistance, training, and also provide prior approval of budget expenses that you may have. They're going to be your go-to for policy and technical questions. So anytime you have a question, please do reach out to the grant administrators. Of course, they may not always know the answer, but they're going to work very hard to get you an answer and get back to you. So everybody always asks, how do I get my reimbursements? On a very high level, you're going to need to understand your budget that was created within the application. You're going to be completing your reimbursements for actual expenditures during 1 month periods using the approved line items that you created from the budget. Now, we do require all grants when submitting reimbursements to submit the summary pages to GCC for each expense category. These documents will be uploaded using the reimbursement checklist that can be found on the GCC website, and they'll be uploaded into the Grants Enterprise Management System, or what we refer to as GEMS. We ask that you try when possible to please scan your documents portrait style. This is going to allow our grant managers to better be able to view it, to be able to get through the processing faster, and to be able to provide that quality customer service that we're driving to provide back to you. The expense cover sheets can be labeled as personnel A1, supplies will be B1, proof of payment B2, and so on. All supporting documents will be included within each category and should be behind the cover sheet to form the expense category reimbursement packet. Supporting documents should be labeled with a category identifier and the page number. For example, the supporting documents under personnel can be cover sheet A1, timesheet A2, payroll register A3, and proof of payment A4. This will allow your grant administrator to quickly locate those items and be able to refer back to them as they're looking at other information. When you upload the packets to GEMS, you will upload each expense category separately. So there will be one for personnel, one for supplies, one for contractual, one for travel, and one for equipment. We also ask that you use the recommended nomenclature that you see here on the screen for uploading those packets. And you'll see personnel, October 2022, the agency name and the project number. And another example is for the upload of equipment, November 2022, agency name and the project number. So reimbursements are going to be due the last day of the month for actual expenses made during the previous month. So if it is September 30th, 2022, your August reimbursement is due. If you submit on time in GEMS your reimbursement, our grant administrator has a goal to be able to provide a turnaround within 10 days of your reimbursement. Now, some of our grant administrators work hard to do it much quicker than that, but they have 10 days to be able to either approve, deny, or send back for modifications. If you are late in submitting a reimbursement, our grant managers have 30 days to turn around and approve, deny, or send back for modifications. A couple notes to keep in mind: final reimbursements are going to be due 60 days after the period of performance ends. You may submit these also early. I'll say that again: your final reimbursements, you're more than welcome to submit early. You do not have to wait to the end of the time period. A couple of changes that I wanted to mention from last year. Due to the reduction of funding that GCC has received in some of our different funding sources, we made changes in our guidelines so that we have a little bit lengthier period that we expect budget adjustments to be submitted. It's 90 days from the end of the period of performance without an approved justification. So what I wanted to highlight is that we still accept budget adjustments within that 90-day window. You just have to have a justification that makes sense and is reasonable. And so if something unforeseen happens, COVID was a big one that we had for several years that we've been working with. that would be a justification that would be accepted, and we'd be able to process your budget adjustment. Um, However, having remaining funds at the end of the year and asking for a budget adjustment to spend down those funds is not going to be a valid justification. In addition, we have removed the SAM holds that we used to have for SAM.gov renewals, and will no longer be requiring you to renew your SAM.gov registration. However, you will have to have a UEI for each new grant that gets started. That UEI is gained through SAM.gov, but it is different from the registration process, so you don't have to go in and fully register with SAM.gov. Also discussed last year and continuing this year, GCC is reverting remaining funds from year one, once you complete your final reimbursement, back to our federal grant. So this is going to allow GCC to better track remaining funds and to better utilize those remaining funds. Once the final reimbursement is complete, you will check that the final reimbursement is complete box, or that it's the final reimbursement box. Once the reimbursement is paid, you must complete a budget adjustment to freeze these funds and move them up into the surplus. When you move them up into the surplus with a budget adjustment, it will be approved by your grant manager or your grant administrator. And once it is approved, then they will open up the second year for you to be able to spend from. Keep in mind, you have 45 days after the end of the first period of performance. So the first year's period of performance, you have 45 days to submit that final reimbursement. If we have projects that don't meet that 45-day window, they will be put on a hold. No further expenses will be able to be made until those final reimbursements are submitted. And we will not make payment on anything until those final reimbursements are submitted. A friendly reminder, documentation is really what keeps us all away from having audits or having to repay funds. And GCC is like you. We have to have adequate documentation for all of our expenses. And this includes the proof of payment. Proof of payment is in the form of a bank statement or a canceled check. We cannot process anything without having that proof of payment. And at this point, I wanted to introduce our newest team lead, Valari Hunter, to share more information on budget adjustments and personnel expenses.
Thank you, Jason. Good morning, everyone. I'm Valari Hunter. And as Jason stated, I will be covering two areas, adjustments as well as project personnel and employee benefits. So let's get started. There are two types of adjustments. The first is the non-budgetary adjustment, which is used for proposed modifications such as a grant period extension, project scope change, which requires prior approval, grant personnel change, excluding the authorizing official, project director, and financial officer, as well as a project adjustment. Now, changes to the authorizing official and project director or financial officer will need to be made under the organization's profile in GEMS. Okay, next is the monetary budget adjustment, and that would be used for modifications such as reallocation of funds, increased funds, and changing quantities for grant budget lines. Now, a monetary budget adjustment must be initiated if the modification proposes to add a new category to the grant budget, such as travel. If you did not have travel in your existing budget, you would be using your monetary budget adjustment for that. Also, to move funds from one budget line to another. An example of this would be if you would like to move personnel funds to a supply budget line. The third option is to increase or decrease total cost of quantity to an existing budget line in a grant. And a good example of this would be maybe you need to increase the quantities for your supply budget line. A monetary budget adjustment would be used for that. Now, when submitting a budget adjustment, please remember non-budgetary adjustment or monetary budget adjustment must be submitted in GEMS. Also, it is imperative for adjustments to be submitted within 48 hours of communicating with your grants administrator regarding proposed modifications and receiving a verbal or written approval. Now, doing this would prevent reimbursements from being delayed. It would ensure your project remains current and prevent adjustment denials. Also, keep in mind, board minutes are required, excuse me, for a budget adjustment associated with salary increases. Salary increases must be approved by your organization's board of directors for the entire staff, not only grant-funded positions. Also, board minutes documenting approval of salary increases must be uploaded to the project's documents in GEMS. Now, budget modifications are capped at a 10% for grants $250,000 and greater. Also, changes to match funds require a monetary budget adjustment. However, the match is not counted towards the 10% cap. Also, there is no limit on the number of monetary budget adjustments you may submit to GCC. Now, once you have been allowed to move 10% of the grant, of the total grant award, any other adjustments will be reviewed on a case-by-case basis for approval or denial. Also, if additional funds are approved to increase the total amount of the grant award, a budget modification will need to be submitted to increase the project budget. The 10% cap will be increased to include the additional funds. Budget modifications or adjustments will be denied for the following reasons. One, if the adjustment exceeds 10% of the total grant, or if the adjustment is not consistent with the grant's purposes or not allowable, if it does not support and or further the program. Another reason would be if there is supplanting. And lastly, budget adjustments can be submitted 90 days before the end of the period of performance without justification. After 90 days, your grants administrator with strong justification can approve budget adjustments on a case-by-case basis. All right, so let's take a look at the personnel and employee benefits. So what are personnel and employee benefits? This consists of salary, paid leave, FICA, and of course your health care benefits, retirement, and workers' comp. So if we take a look at the payroll documentation required for personnel and fringe benefits, the first document would be the employee's pay stub. And the required elements for the pay stub are the employee's legal name, gross wages, total hours worked, your rate of pay or salary, the pay period start and end dates, the pay date, as well as deductions for taxes, benefits, and other items. Now here you see a sample pay stub that contains the required elements. Now the pay stub can also contain benefits paid by the employer, and if the employer paid benefits are not listed on the pay stub, additional documentation is required for reimbursement of paid fringe benefits. Now this additional, documentation will include provider billing statement for the reimbursement period, And that provider billing statement must contain the coverage period, as well as the covered employees with the type of coverage, the employee cost, as well as the total amount due. Now, proof of total payment to the provider is also required, as well as benefits cost allocation sheet for agencies with multiple funding sources. You must document how you're allocating those costs. Now, the time and activity sheet is the next documentation that is required. And there are two types of time and activity sheets. The first is the single funding source timesheet and the multiple funding source timesheet. Now, the personnel requirement for your organization and the GCC project will determine the appropriate time and activity sheet for each employee. Now, the single funding source timesheet will be used for volunteers and employees contributing time or cash match to one funding source. Now, keep in mind, the employee will be working 100% of their time on one project. On the other hand, you have the multiple funding source time and activity sheet. Now, the multiple funding source timesheet is required for employees contributing time to more than one funding source or project and whose salary is paid by more than one funding source. Now, the timesheet must contain all hours worked during the reimbursement period for all funding sources. Now, a few things to note about the timesheet are all fields are required. The employee's legal name is required on all documents, and the employee's name must match the name on the pay stub. The employee's name and position title on the timesheet must correspond with the information submitted in GEMS. And the timesheet must detail completed tasks for the documented hours. Most importantly, the time and activity sheet must be signed by the employee and the supervisor with firsthand knowledge of the work performed. In addition, wet signatures are required. However, embedded electronic and digital signatures are permitted at this time. Now, the personnel cover page must be submitted with personnel and benefits reimbursement requests. Instructions for completing the personnel cover page is located at the bottom of the form. And a key thing to remember regarding the personnel cover page is each item that would be listed on the personnel cover page represents a personnel budget line item, such as a salaried position, as well as the total sum of the employer paid fringe benefit for the reimbursement period. And this would be things such as your FICA, retirement, and hospitalization. Also, each fringe benefit total sum will be entered on separate lines on that personnel cover page. Now, GCC is required to ensure only authorized grant-funded employees are approved for reimbursements, as well as services are being provided. So, as a result, notification of employee separation and new hires are required. Notifications will be submitted by email to your GCC grants administrator within 10 working days of the personnel change. Also, the notification is required to contain the employee's name, the position title, salary, and benefits. Now, as well as the last date of employment for any employee separation or the effective date of new hires. And that's all for me. Thank you for your time. I'll turn it over to Carolyn Locklear.
Good morning. My name is Carolyn Locklear, and I am a GCC Grant Administrator Supervisor. I will be presenting supporting documentation for equipment. Supporting documentation for equipment must include receipts, invoices, or any other documentation that supports the purchase of the equipment. Copies of 3 bids from vendors are required when the equipment is $10,000 or greater. A sole source provider form is necessary if there is only one provider who has the precise equipment you are trying to purchase. This form will have the justification on why you are choosing a sole source provider. Property tags are also required for equipment purchase with grant funds and have a value of $5,000 or more. Also, a property control record and equipment certification form must be completed for all equipment purchased with grant funds, which needs to be uploaded in GEMS under the attachments. All of the above items should be accessible during your site visit and when submitting your reimbursements. Next, we will review the sole source provider request form. This is the sole source provider request form, which is located on the GCC website. On this form, you must complete the project name and number, implementing agency, authorizing agency, project director's name, email, and phone number, and the proposed dollar amount for the purchase. Please note, if the purchase is more than $250,000, there must be prior approval from the Department of Justice. Enter the contractor or vendor's name, check the reason for the request, and if other is selected, you must provide an explanation. Enter the submitted by and the requested date. Your grant administrator will approve or deny the request. The form will then be uploaded to your project for future references. Next, we will review examples of property tags. Here are some examples of property tags that are required for all equipment. The equipment must have a unique number assigned to them, which is a way to keep track of the equipment purchased by GCC grant funds. Next, we will review the property control form, certification form. On the top section of the property control certification form, we have the authorizing agency, implementing agency, project name, number, project director's name, number, and email address. The rest of the form have multiple sections for different equipment. This section contains the item description, serial number, asset number, purchase date, vendor name, cost, purchase by, insurance coverage, assigned to, equipment location, and the purpose of the equipment. The next slide is continuing pages if you need it. If you have several pieces of equipment, then you will have space for that. Next, we will reference the equipment cover sheet. The equipment cover sheet is required when submitting a reimbursement request. Project name and number and the reporting period are required, preferably by the month when the equipment is purchased. So if you're submitting a reimbursement for the month of October, it will be for the period of October the 1st through October the 31st, 2022. The document number, items purchased, vendor's name, quantity, cost per item, total cost, then indicate the amount of the federal share and the match accordingly. You can find additional instructions below on this form. Next, I will be addressing supporting documentations for consultants or contractors. Please note, last year, GCC implemented that if your budget includes any contractual lines, your project cannot be opened until the pre-contract request form and the unexecuted contract are approved by your GCC grant administrator. Approval may take up to 10 business days, so please submit as soon as possible to avoid delays. So with your projects that are opening in October, if you have a contract line in those in your budget, you can begin to submit your pre-contract request forms with your unexecuted contract to your grant administrator now for them to approve. So once you receive your award, you can go ahead and it'll be approved and your project can be open. If you do not know, if you have a current grant administrator, you can send those forms to them at this time. And if that grant administrator change once the grant is open, they will see that the previous grant administrator have approved your pre-contract award. Next, Jason. Complete all the fields on this form: the request date, the project name and number, agency name, individual name, hourly rate, rate per day not to exceed, the federal share to be reimbursed, the match share to be allocated, the grant period, the description of the scope of work to be performed, print the project director's name, sign and date, and submit to your grant administrator. The bottom portion of the form will be completed by your grant administrator. Next, we will discuss some requirements for submitting a reimbursement. All reimbursements must have a cover sheet. When submitting the invoices from a consultant or contractor for reimbursements, the vendor's name, date of service, hours worked, payment due for the services, and a list or description of the services delivered from the consultant or contractor must be clearly displayed. Keep in mind, the cap for a contractor or consultant is $81.25 an hour and not to exceed $650 per day. Otherwise, a contract excessive rate form must be submitted along with the pre-contract request form, copy of the unexecuted contract, and resume if applicable. Remember that a new contract will be required for your new grant. Contracts should not cross over to a new grant period. If over the capped amount, the following form after the cover sheet will be utilized. Reimbursements must be submitted with the contractual cover sheet filled out with some supporting documentation behind, which should include the invoice and the proof of payment that includes the bank statement. Provide the project name, number, the reporting period, the document number, and supporting documents. Contractor's name, contractor's title, hours of service, rate, the total cost that will be the hours multiplied by the rate, then fill out the portion of the federal share and the match. This information should be the same information that is in GEMS. Additional instructions can be located at the bottom of the form. Next, you will find the excessive rate request form. Please submit the project name, number, agency name, individual if applicable, the scope of work, requested hour rate, rate per pay not to exceed amount, federal share to be reimbursed, match share to be allocated, grant period, and a valid justification. Project director's name must be signed and dated. The bottom portion of this form will be completed by your grant administrator. Next, we will see examples of consultants and contractors. They are counselors, lawyers, software and hardware, computer engineers, therapists, ground maintenance staff. Volunteers, board members, and employees do not qualify as consultants or contractors. Please remember that all of these forms that I have discussed are available on the GCC website. Thank you for your attention. And next, Ms. Tanya Ogburn will be providing you with information.
Good morning. My name is Tanya Ogburn, and I'm a grants management supervisor. For the next few slides, I'm going to talk about supporting documentation needed for travel and supplies. So we'll start with travel. Receipts are needed for any conference registrations, along with the conference agenda or itinerary. Receipts are also needed for the hotel, the airline, taxi, or car rental. Meals and mileage per diem rates are based on your agency's travel policy. If your agency does not have a travel policy regarding the per diem rates, then the state's per diem rates should be used. If you are using your agency's travel policy, the agency's travel per diem rates should not exceed the state's per diem rates. A mileage travel log form should be submitted as supported documentation for any employee's mileage reimbursements. Out-of-state travel requires prior approval by your grants administrator. Out-of-state travel may have already been approved in your budget, but remember, the budget is projected and plans do change. Therefore, prior approval is required. Also remember that a budget modification does not provide prior approval either. This is the prior approval request form that must be completed with all necessary details about the out-of-state travel. Please provide your grants administrator with the name of the conference, date of the conference, an agenda or website with the conference information, budgeted cost, and all attendees at least 90 days prior to the travel. The travel cover sheet must be submitted with all supporting documentation and receipts after the travel has taken place. Please note that the per diem websites are at the bottom of the travel cover sheet for you to use if your agency does not have a per diem policy in place. You can refer to the instructions at the bottom of the form for direction on how to fill out the form completely. You should also send in the approved out-of-state prior approval form, if applicable, with the supporting documentation for that reimbursement. Now we're going to talk about the supporting documentation needed for supplies and operating expenses. I cannot stress the importance of having receipts and/or invoices when submitting your reimbursements. You need receipts and/or invoices for any expenses you submit for reimbursement. Vendor invoices include utility bills, invoices and receipts for rent. A copy of the lease should be loaded into the attachment in GEMS, and you also need proof of payment. Proof of payment may be a receipt showing it was paid with cash or a charge card. It could be a canceled check, not a copy of the check, a canceled check, or the bank statement showing check clearance. If you paid with a charge card like a Visa, for instance, we will need the bank statement showing the charge card has also been paid for that month. Receipts and invoices must show the vendor's name, date of service or purchase, the amount due, and list of what services were performed or what was purchased. There are 3 methods to divide up expenses from receipts between different grants. First one is to make a separate purchase for each grant and get a receipt which would be separate for each grant. That is the most preferred method. Number 2, if you're making a combined purchase, attach the documentation explaining what items were purchased for each grant. Remember to submit a copy of the receipt for each grant. You can write the grant number beside each item on the receipt. And the third method would be, if you're making a combined purchase, make a copy of the receipt for each grant, highlight the items on the receipt showing which items were charged to that particular grant. Submit copies of the documentation with all grant reimbursement claims. Here's a sample of an invoice that shows the date entered for payment. The invoice has the name of the company providing the service, the date and the amount of the invoice, and it's stamped with the date it was entered for payment. Here are the proofs of payments that I had mentioned earlier. These are the forms like a canceled or cleared check with the endorsement side of the check. Clear checks, they're usually going to be available as a scanned image from your online bank account. Credit card or bank statement should contain the cardholder's address, summary of account information, when the payment's due, the balance, and all other details relevant to the transaction being requested for reimbursement. Here we continue with forms of proof of payment. Bank statement showing expense, cleared, canceled check, invoice showing balance paid, and receipt showing the expense was paid. A receipt is any document that contains the 5 following IRS required elements. You have the name of the vendor, the transaction date, the detailed description of goods or services purchased, and the form of payment. Here's an example of a proof of payment. This is a check produced by Intuit Payroll. The bank statement should be submitted showing that the check paid from Intuit also cleared the bank. This is a check showing it was a direct deposit into an employee's account. The bank statement should be submitted showing that the check paid to the payroll processing company also cleared the bank. This is a canceled check stamped on the back with the bank's endorsement and the date it cleared the bank. Make sure you always include the supply cover sheet when you submit your reimbursement. You can refer to the instructions at the bottom of the form for direction on how to fill the form out completely. I'm going to turn this over now to Mr. Burley Spinks, our grants manager team lead.
Good morning. I'm Burley Spinks, a grants administrator, and I will be talking to you about match and reporting. Any funder may require that a grantee match some portion of the funds that they provide. But what is match? Match is the portion of the costs not paid by the federal government. When a federal grant requires the grantee to match funds, there are restrictions and regulations that govern what can be counted as match and how these funds must be documented. Additionally, grant agreements specify what sources of match funds can be used and which types of match funds are allowed. Simply stated, match is the amount of funds that grantees are required to contribute to accomplish their purpose of the project. These match funds are subject to the same rules that govern federal funds, which means that if the cost is not allowable under the federal award, it is not allowable as a match. Match is usually described as a percentage of the total amount of the project. As you can see in the example, a 20% match of a $100,000 project would be $20,000. So determine your match amount, take the total amount of your award, and multiply the match percentage required by the funder. There are 2 types of match: a cash match, also known as the hard match, and the in-kind match, also known as the soft match. Federal grants typically require to match contributions that come from a non-federal source. Cash match is the most common type of match, and as stated on the slide, is either the grantee's own funds or general revenue or cash donations from non-federal third parties or non-federal grants. In simple terms, cash match is an actual cash contribution to the project, such as cash expenditures for costs related to the project-related staff salaries, consultant fees, equipment rentals, and travel costs. This slide lists the line items that can be used on your budget for cash match. Keep in mind that if your project does not meet the committed match funds, your agency may be required to refund a portion of the federal funds paid. In-kind refers to resources besides money. In-kind match or contributions or donations that come from the grantee agency or by non-federal third parties in the form of the values of personnel, goods and services, including direct and indirect costs. As described in the slide, an in-kind match or non-cash contributions such as a volunteer's time or donations of goods and services directly benefiting the project, including donating equipment, space, and utilities. For donations of goods, make sure the items are used to further the project's goals and objectives. Make sure to use fair market value to determine the allowable cost of the in-kind contribution. People sometimes volunteer to help your organization. When using volunteers' time as an in-kind match, volunteer services must be documented and supported by using the same method used to document employees' time and attendance records. Time and activity sheets must be signed by an authorizing official and include a description of the work performed directly benefiting the project. Hourly rates for volunteer services should be consistent with hourly rates paid to regular staff performing the same work. If no comparison is possible, then rates should be consistent with those paid for similar work in the labor market. Make sure that your match contributions are verifiable on your records and are necessary and reasonable to achieve your project's goals and objectives. Make sure that your match contributions are not included as contributions for any other federally assisted project and are not paid by the federal government under another grant. In simple terms, time or resources spent on a project should only be counted as a match for a single project. Make sure your match costs are allowable and approved in the project's budget. Make sure all your match adheres to the requirements of 2 CFR 20 subpart D. Match contributions are subject to the same rules and the same support and documentation as any other expenditure made with the project's funds, as discussed earlier in the presentation. And although match contributions can be applied at the end of the program year, your agency must consider how waiting to submit match until the end of the year will impact the utilization rate throughout the program year. The full match share must be contributed by the end of the award period. For in-kind match contributions, make sure to document these areas. Who is the source? Make sure that your agency can demonstrate that the contribution is from an acceptable donor source. What is donated? Make sure that your agency can demonstrate that what is being used as match is suitable for match. Be specific about and show how it relates to your project's goals and objectives. How was the value determined? The donor should generally determine the value, and it should be based on standard objective sources rather than best guesses. Who verified the information? Who certified that the information is correct? Is there a responsible party who is prepared to sign that the information is true and correct? All these requirements are especially important for audit purposes. And again, make sure all your match adhere to the requirements in 2 CFR 200 subpart D. At the end of the program year, any remaining funds will be moved to surplus to be reverted to GCC minus the match funds. To finalize it, it is very important that you keep records that clearly show the source, amount, and timing of your match contributions, and that the full match share is met at the end of your project. For any questions regarding match funds, please contact your grants administrator. Reporting. Timely reporting is critical to GCC's continual funding. Therefore, we need you as the subrecipient to complete your reports to us and other federal agencies in an accurate and timely fashion. Please be aware, sanctions will be imposed on subrecipients who do not submit reports in a timely manner. Listed are required reports and due dates for all subrecipients. Please note the notice of grant implementation and the initial sub-grant reward report are due immediately after your grant is open. Expense reimbursements are due monthly once the expense has incurred. Performance reports. You will hear more about these in the breakout. Progress reports. You will also hear more about these in the breakout. Audit and financial reporting. North Carolina state law requires every non-governmental entity that receives state or federal pass-through grant funds from a state agency to file annual reports on how those grant funds were used. Specific requirements for each funding level are as follows. Level 1 is for grants less than $25,000. The required documents needed is a certification form and the state grants compliance reporting for receipts of less than $25,000. These forms and reporting must be submitted to the web address in bold. Level 2 funding are for grants between $25,000 and $499,999. Two additional forms with the additional forms in Level 1 are the schedule of receipts and expenditures and program activities and accomplishments report. As you can see, please send these documents to the address in bold. Level 3 are for grants between $500,000 and $749,999. The three forms needed and submitted to the first email in bold is a certification form, state grants compliance reporting for receipts of $25,000 or more, and program activities and accomplishment reports. Please pay attention that you must also submit to DPS internal audit at the second web address in bold, a single audit prepared and completed in accordance with the general accepted government auditing standards. The second part of Level 3 are for grants of $750,000 and more. You have the same requirements as the grants between $500,000 and $749,999. However, you must also post a single audit to the Federal Audit Clearinghouse. Please make note of the web address in bold, bottom of the page. Thank you.
Okay, so I wanted to invite Kevin to be able to share a little bit about the GCC website, the future of GEMS, but also to share with you where you find some of this stuff that we've been talking about, some of these different documents and forms, where you find our guidelines and where everything will be posted once we conclude the presentation. Kevin?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Kevin Farrell, and I am a business analyst with the Governor's Crime Commission. And as Jason said, I wanted to talk to you about the GCC website and the future of GEMS. So Jason, if you go to the next slide. First, let me say that everything that has been mentioned today, the recordings of this webcast, all the PowerPoints, information from the breakout sessions will be on the website. I'm going to show you where it will be. And also, I've been looking at the chat and I see a lot of questions are answered by saying, it's on the website, it's on the website. So I wanted to give you a quick tour of the website to try to help you out with finding stuff. So at the top of this slide is the web address, www.ncdps.gov/GCC. I would recommend each of you to visit that and go ahead and bookmark it because it's something you're going to be needing to access pretty frequently. And the screenshot here is just the top of the website. How I'm going to walk through this is kind of scrolling down the page. So at the top of our website, it always says Governor's Crime Commission, and then there's always this box that has a scrolling kind of three series of articles of what's the most important thing going on at GCC right now. So right now, the website says September 21st Grant Award Workshop is the most important thing going on. And then there are two little arrows on that image that will let you advance to the next one. The next one's actually the Grant Writing Workshop coming up in early October. And then the third one, if you continue to advance it, is about the Justice Data Portal. So the top three things going on at GCC is what you will find at the top. You can pause that. It switches every 15 seconds. You can hit pause, and then if you click on the banner, it will take you to an article about whatever the topic is. And for instance, when this workshop is over, next week sometime, you will see a banner article up there that says resources from the grant writing workshop or the grant award workshop. And that's where you'll find this recording. You'll find all the PowerPoints and all the attachments from the breakout sessions. Next slide, Jason. As you continue to scroll down the website, the next section I wanted to point out is about our newsletter. So many of you may have been getting our newsletter for the past few months. It's called The Gist. And on our website, there's this section dedicated to it. If you were to click there, you could go subscribe to it. As project directors, you will automatically be subscribed once your project opens. But if anyone else in your organization wants to subscribe, you can send them to this section of the website and they can subscribe to the newsletter. You can also see past issues. We're on our third issue right now, but all previous issues will be available at that link. Next slide, Jason. So as you continue going down the website, this is probably the most important section. There's a section in the middle of the site that has these multicolored boxes, and each box has a topic, and I'll kind of walk through them, but this is the section you'll be going to most often. So the top row there, the very first top left-hand corner says about the commission. You can visit that site for a list of commissioners, just general information about the commission. The far right box on the top row says commission staff. That's going to be a section that you will go to find your grant administrator's contact information, your grant planner's contact information. Our entire staff is listed there with links to emails, also a general phone number for the office, and information's there. The second row of information gets more into grant administration, which is what you guys will be doing. The first purple box there is grant process. You can go into that section to kind of see an overview of when do applications start and when do projects open, close, kind of a general overview. The next two boxes, grant forms and grant resources, is where you'll spend a lot of time. And I have another slide on these, but grant forms is just that. Many of the things that were presented in the session this morning mentioned a form that needed to be completed or filled out. You would go to this grant form section to find those. The grant resources, that light green box in the second row, is just that, resources for your grant. There are sections there. There will also be a section there for the 2022 Grant Award Workshop recording and PowerPoints and attachments and information. There are also sections there for each of the funding sources. So if you have a juvenile justice project, there's a section there that has just information on juvenile justice resources. And the far right box, the green one on the second row, is how you would log into GEMS. So you can go to the GCC website, access that box to log into the GEMS system. If you're not aware, the GEMS system is the online grants administration tool that's developed by DPS that you use to both apply for the grant, manage it, and administer it. It's an online tool that helps you communicate to GCC. The information that you enter there ultimately flows to your grant administrator. And we'll talk more about the future of GEMS in a little bit, but that's where you can log into it, in that green box. And then below this section is another place for us to highlight information. Right now, there's a YouTube video that talks about the Justice Data Portal. And over time that will change and get updated, but it's just another section to highlight information that you guys need. And what I wanted to make sure you understood is this series of boxes in the middle of the page is where you'll find the most information. Jason, next slide. If you were to click on the grants form, that gray box, this is where you would go to a section that says, here are the grant forms. And it looks like there's not much there, but really those 4 sections will kind of collapse and expand and collapse. So if you were to click on post award, you would find all of these forms that have been mentioned today. As you're working through applications, the application section has forms that are relevant to the application. The award period, which is before the project opens, there are specific forms for that area there. So wanted to show you what it looks like once you go into one of those boxes, and make sure you understand that when you see the little plus button there, that's a section that will collapse or open up and give you more information. Next slide, Jason. So this is going back out to the main page again and continuing to work down. At the bottom of the page, I wanted to show you that there are more kind of boxes down there with information in it. Our GCC meeting resources are there, a link to the Justice Data Portal. There are 2 boxes there that are very specific for death and custody reporting and juvenile justice compliance reporting information. If those are relevant to you, you probably already know about them. And then at the section down there that looks like someone taking notes and says online training, we have a series of YouTube videos that your grant administrator will be sending you information on once your project opens. And this is how you access those. So they're going to say, hey, we have some training available for you for how to use GEMS. You'll go to this section, open up that link at the bottom there with a little graduation cap, and it will take you to a form to fill out to get access. And then you will select, it'll say, what type of contact are you? And you'll say, I'm a current subrecipient. Because I have an open project, I'm a subrecipient. And then you'll get 4 YouTube videos that you can walk through and take a quiz at the end to prove that you watched it. That will help you use the GEM system. Next slide, Jason. So that's it for the website. Just wanted you guys to have kind of a quick tour of it. I would encourage you to talk to your grants administrator about, hey, how can I find something on the website that they know where everything is and they can help walk you through it. But we wanted to give you a quick overview. Next, I want to talk about the future of GEMS. So if this is your first project, you'll get to know GEMS very well. If you've been using it for a while, then you know that GEMS is kind of the heartbeat of your project. That's where your budget is stored, where all the information that you are sending to GCC for approval and review, that's how you communicate with us. So GEMS has been around for several years now, and it's built in an older technology that just can no longer be updated. The financial system that North Carolina uses is also going away and will be replaced with a newer technology that GEMS cannot communicate with. So we're going to have to find a new solution for a grants management system online. So 2023 will be the last year of using GEMS. So the projects that are opening now will be administered through GEMS. If it's a 2-year project, we're probably going to be switching it after the first year to a different system. But your projects will open in GEMS and then at a later date be moved to another system. So we have selected what the system will be, and I'm sorry I can't say what it is right now. We are in the process of signing a contract to start work on it. But I will say, if you've ever applied for or dealt with the Governor's Highway Safety Program, then you have probably seen the system that we're going to be using. Very similar to that, there are several state agencies that use this system, so you may be used to using it. But for those that aren't, no fear, we're going to train everyone on it. So the last bullet there is that we'll keep sub-recipients updated throughout the process, and we'll provide training in 2023. So you will be hearing from your grant administrator along the way about, this is what's coming, this is what's coming. And also from Jason, we'll be sending out information once it's available. And we will be hosting trainings. I assume next year's grant workshop will probably be a lot of training around this new system. So wanted to make you guys aware of that. Again, I'll just say one more time, because I know folks are asking, Everything will be, everything that's presented today will be on the website. We'll get links to these recordings and also links to the PowerPoints and any attachments from the breakout sessions. That's all I have. Thanks, Jason.
Thank you, Kevin. So again, if you have any questions or concerns, please do not hesitate to reach out to your grant manager or grant administrator. We're definitely here to help you. That's what we want to be able to provide to you, is any kind of help that you may need to make your program successful. Because ultimately, when your program is successful, it benefits all the citizens within our communities. We appreciate everything that you're doing as well, and wanted you to know that we value the importance of the services that you're going to be providing and are providing to members of our community.